Welcome on this Monday for joining us. We're going to just start to wrap up today, tomorrow, the discussion on theology of the body. Chapter 3, which is the 8th slide on the theology of the body slides. We'll talk about that today. Naked without shame. And if we are going to look at really where does John Paul get the teaching for theology of the body, he will go back to the book of Genesis, and he will look at Adam and Eve. And as they're walking around the garden, you see these two people that could be completely naked, but there is no embarrassment, there is no shame. So why is that? Because there is no presence of sin in the world at this time. And what's going to happen is original sin will enter the world, and it will start this chain, kind of like this wave of sin that will creep its way into every aspect of our living. Original sin is the first human offense against God. And what sin is that? It is the sin of pride. And pride says that we are better than everyone else. I am better than God. And it is that thought and that approach to life that we are going to really kind of set the tone for the fact that I think that I can use other people, I can use different situations for my own advantage. When it comes to taking a test and people say, well, I'm going to look around and see what other people have for me. I'm not concerned with how much they studied. Well, I'm just concerned about what I get out of this equation, out of this situation. When I look at, well, I need you to send me the homework. So you are there to serve me. That is an example of pride. I think that I'm better. I'm not worried about what I do. I'm just worried about how others can serve me and how others can serve my will and my ego. Original man, there are going to be different stages that John Paul is going to say that kind of puts mankind in their own situations. Original man is man before he and she sin. So you have original man. There was no offense. Then, of course, original sin takes place. He also says there was a thing called original solitude. Man experiences the world without woman. And he realizes that he's very much alone. We're going to take a look tomorrow at the ceiling of the Sistine Chapel. And there's this beautiful image of God reaching out to Adam, but his arm, it's probably one of the most overlooked aspects of this picture, is that God has his arm around woman. Even as he's getting ready to create man, we have very much in his mind the plan of creating woman for man. They are meant to be together. They're meant to be these complementary forces that do not make sense without each other, okay, emotionally and physically. So original solitude is man is very much alone. He's very much alone without woman. Original nakedness. It is this very, very peaceful state where men and women exist without that shame. Lust does not exist, and desire is pure. Desire is pure because it's not looking at the other person in thinking about how do I use you, how do you serve me, and how do you serve my desires. Original innocence. Prior to that sin itself, man's heart, mind, and body is perfectly and completely innocent. The body of the man and the body of the woman is what we call nuptial. It is the nuptial meaning, the marital meaning of the body. It is created to be together. The man and his physicality makes no sense, right? You look at the naked body, probably one of the most famous images in the entire world is Michelangelo's David. There he is in his glory. Man does not make sense without woman. It is there for love-giving and is there for life-giving. So with the nuptial meaning, the marital meaning of the body, we are meant to be together. The original unity. It is the initial experience of perfect unity. We are looking for communion. We desire communion. It is this separateness that pushes us apart, and we're looking for fusion. We're looking to be together. God's love is free, total, faithful, and fruitful. The four elements of love in the free, total, faithful, fruitful. God gives us all of himself without any limitation. His love is complete. It is total. He gives everything he has to us. There is no holding back. It is faithful, being that his love never abandons us. He is always loyal. He is completely and 100% always thinking about what he can give to us. And finally, it is fruitful. It is a love that causes more life. By dying on the cross, he gives us new life. By using our love, we can also become co-creators, and we can give life to each other. So besides original man, then the next stage would be historical man. So original man goes all the way up to original sin. Man sins, and then we have this era, as John Paul II is going to call it, is historical man. It is the period that begins with original sin and goes all the way up to the point until Christ returns. God has this desire to be with us in heaven. Every step of our lives, every moment that we are together, we are called to live as if we're making that journey to heaven. The way that we reach out to each other. These days of isolation, we can still find communion with each other. We can be together. Maybe we're doing things that we've never done as a family before. We see these Zoom parties where people are just reaching out. It's all about, we crave to be together. We crave to be in fusion with each other. That is part of the human heart, the human mind, that we're meant to be together. Eschatological man is man after the final stage of perfection is achieved. We are going to be with God in heaven. Original man, up to the point where we sin. From sin, up to the point that we die, is historical man. And then after we die and we are with God, we have the resurrection, and we call it eschatological man. Okay? That's really important. There's this image that they use in this book, Theology of the Body, and they call it the image of the room. And imagine yourself at the end of your life, and God is called you into heaven. But as you're there with your Lord and Savior, you're there with Jesus Christ, and he says to you, I just want to review your life with you. And we're going to go to imagine giant file cabinets, and they want to open one after the other, and here's the days in which you thought of others before yourself, and you open it, and there's a couple of things in there, and it's like, okay, I thought of my grandparents, I thought of calling them, and I thought of doing things around the house, and I took care of mom and dad, I took care of my brothers and sisters, and you look through the file, and it's like, there's enough in there, but it's certainly not packed. And then you start going through other things, and maybe in the times in which, maybe I went against God, and you start finding, or I went against my parents, and you start finding like some of these cabinets are even more full, and the times that I allowed lust to take over my life, and the times in which I allowed pride to take over my life. And you start going through all these different cabinets. If you really put things in perspective and you looked at your life and as a reflection, how do I live my life? If I'm putting things in different bins, which bins are more full? And that's the idea of the room. And it's like because of our tendency to sin, because of this, what are we doing? How am I living my life? How do I overcome this? And that's the main reason why we have Christ come into this world. He knows that we're incapable of doing this ourselves, so he realizes that he must come to earth to not only show us how to live, but to also give us a pattern, and also the cross is going to be a way of reconciling the way we live on earth with the way that we should be in heaven. Eschatological man will soon be married, but not on earth. He will be united with God in heaven. We'll be reunited with all of the members of the church, and especially Christ, the bride. Okay, we have the church, which is the bride, and we have Christ. And in that union, we will all be totally and completely together. It's not this physical union that when we get, if you remember the story where someone had asked, it's like this widow, she she's married to this man and he dies. Now in Mosaic law, the next oldest available brother, unmarried brother, would be the one who would have to assume the responsibility of the brother's wife. So there's a question posed to Jesus, and it says, well, you have this widow, and then the next brother comes along and he marries this widow, but yet he dies. And then it goes on to the next brother. And they pose this kind of ridiculous scenario where the widow ends up being married to like several of the brothers. Who is she married to in heaven? And the answer is basically this. There's not physical sexual relationships in heaven, but rather, yet we retain the gender, but which is the difference that we have between the sexes. But there's not this physical union. It is this union that we are together with all of the members of the church, united with Christ, united with the church, and united with God. That's really the point, and that's what Jesus is going to say to us here at this point where we become eschatological man. The preparation for the marriage in heaven begins now. We often talk about courtship. Courtship is the way that we treat the other person. In the old days, there's this movie that was created in the 1950s called The Quiet Man. And in that movie, you might see it around St. Patrick's Day. And in that movie, you see like this courting take place where you all needed the permission of the families, where you kind of, like there was even an arrangement where the two families would decide, well, this is the couple and they're going to get married. But you started courting, and it was a time to get to know each other. It's not about physicality. It is about getting to know emotionally and even psychically, philosophically. Can we be together for the rest of our lives? Can we be together? Can we take the next step together? And that's really what courtship is all about. How do we get to know each other? We're so worried about can we be intimate with each other? Can I give myself into my desires? That what ends up happening is that we lose the essential part of the relationship, where we really just have to learn to be together. And I think the quarantine has shown us the importance of that, where it's about getting to know each other. It's about getting to know each other deeply on a real, personal, and even spiritual level. I'm going to jump ahead a couple of slides. We're going to go to that St. Irenaeus quote. Man is rational, therefore he is like God. He is created with free will, and he is master over what he does, over his acts. Man is rational because we think about what we do. We need to think, as you remember that quote the other day that we had in the video, where Frank Sheets says, man very seldom thinks about sex. No, he just gives into sex. He gives into his desires. He's not really thinking about what he's doing. The next slide, we have this destructive appetite. And there's this picture of a wolf. And the book uses this because it really kind of shows very often how we kind of treat our sexuality. In the old Arctic cultures, in which they would try to protect their livestock from wolves, what they would do is they would take a very sharp knife and they would put it facing the sky, the very sharp part, and they would tie meat onto these very sharp knives, and they would bury the handle into the ground, leaving the meat exposed. And what this would do is it would lure the wolves to come, and they would start licking the top of the knife. And of course, the more the animal started to eat the meat, they would cut their mouths. The wolf did not look at the blood on the knife as if it was its own. It would think that it was part of the blood of the animal that it was eating. So all of a sudden you had this voracious appetite, and the wolf, actually the appetite became even more destructive, and the more that it sensed the blood of the animal, right, that it was really killing the animal, which is really already dead, the more that it hurt itself, pretty soon the animal will end up bleeding to death because of the fact that they were attacking this. Now, obviously, it seems pretty barbaric, and it's this ancient practice, but it really shows the destructive nature of how our instincts can kill us if we just give in to instincts. If we're just giving in to the fact that I'm allowing what I just feel I should be doing, as opposed to thinking about what is the nature of my action. If I approach my sexuality with purely this instinct, it can be pretty destructive. There are going to be lies of the body. Fornication, which is sex outside of marriage. Contraception, which is the way that we try to prevent conception. And you have pornography. These, John Paul II is going to say, these are not part of the language of love. Love is the way that I care for another human being, the way that I go outside myself and I take care of another human being. And ultimately, how do I treat that person with the way and the dignity that they truly deserve? Fornication, contraception, and pornography, all lies of the body that go out and beyond the way that I should act and what I should really truly do. Fornication in this hookup culture is seen as no big deal. It's like, well, if you really like someone, maybe you should see if you're compatible. You should see if your desires are everything that they should be. It's just totally natural. Just go do it part of the culture. But what ends up happening is that we lose a sense of the other person in the objectifying of sexuality. This person becomes something that, well, I'm just attracted to them. Am I attracted to the person? Do I see the true person that I'm trying to court, or the person that I'm trying to be with? Or does it just become about this hooking up, and then the hooking up becomes part of becomes central to the relationship, which it should not be? Contraception is going to stand in the way of the couple's full love and the gift to oneself. Obviously, contraception, we're talking about even in marriage. Pope Paul VI is going to write the encyclical, which he's going to call Humanae Vitae, on human life, and it's going to really deal with the importance of understanding the nature of giving of oneself to another. And we're going to talk a little bit about natural family planning, which is the natural way to plan the family, deciding whether you do or you do not want children. Pornography, the same thing. There's no self-giving. It is the sexually explicit images or depiction of persons in words, images that create the arousal in the human beings. And it is just, the body is separated from the person, and it just makes us enter into this world of lust and fantasy. How do we live a life of virtue? How do I live this life that I'm called to? Like we sit here and say, don't do this, please don't do that. And how do I live this? Well, maybe we should remove temptation. If people, when you, for every average human being, if I do something, Jesus says very clearly, and it kind of took people by surprise, if your right hand causes you to sin, then cut it off. He was not asking us to practice self-mutilation. He's saying to avoid the activities that cause us to sin. If it's one of those things where when I'm hanging out with my friends, maybe we drink too much. Hang out with my girlfriend, maybe I'm entering into when we're alone, maybe I'm causing this this temptation. Maybe we shouldn't do it. Remove the temptation. Mass is something very, very important. The way that we practice our faith is important. It is very, very difficult to be a person of prayer, a person of worship. And if you're really, truly doing it as you should, it becomes part of you. The way that we're going to treat ourselves and make sacrifices will also seep into our daily living. Keep busy is also something very, very important. St. Francis always said, always be doing something worthwhile. Then the devil will always find you busy. That's why St. Benedict had the prayer and work, because it's not enough to just simply pray. We need to keep busy. If you've noticed yourself during this this pandemic, during this isolation. The busier you are, the better off you are. The times that we find ourselves idle, that we've given to temptation, we give into doing maybe even nothing, and to set up structure, to set up doing things that really become a way of kind of avoiding the temptations, removing the activity, becoming people of prayer, and keeping busy is something that's very, very important to us, right? To living that life of virtue, and to becoming people that say, I need to understand what my sexuality is here for. How am I supposed to practice this? How am I supposed to separate the lust from my desires? If I truly, it's okay to find someone desirable, but do I allow that to just overtake me, and do I not treat this person as they are truly meant to be treated? We'll stop there for today. Have a great day, stay safe, and we'll see you tomorrow. Thanks so much.